Ladies and gentlemen, we are going on an adventure. This particular path has been designed according to esoteric principles or mystical principles, which we're going to explain as we walk along.
So I had the chance to check out the Rosicrucian Fellowship tour, which they do once a year in the month of October. And at the end of the tour, they give you an inside look into their secret temple, which sits on this cool mountaintop called Mount Ecclesia. The Rosicrucians are an order of mystical Christians, and they go back to the 1600s. This particular facility goes back to the early 1900s. The path resembles a serpent, sort of like the Kundalini energy that exists within our spine. And along this path, there are certain centers that correlate to certain parts of the body having to do with the endocrine system. Each of these different parts are attributed to different healing powers and or dimensions and stargates to the spiritual world. So I hope you enjoy it. Check it out.
We start here from the archway, okay? And you notice on each side of the archway there is a lion and a lioness, okay? This is the symbol of the union of the two lions, which is the head and the heart. In order for us to be able to connect consciously to the invisible plane which surrounds us and is invisible to us, we have to link our head and our heart. Without this, forget it. So, we're going to walk the path, and on the path we're going to find 7 landmarks. The mystic number 7. Each of these landmarks correlate to the glands in our endocrine system. And these 7 glands are gateways or stargates to other dimensions. But because we live life of materialism, we don't know how to open the gates. And by starting to live a spiritual life, we discover ways to connect with these invisible worlds that surround us at all times and in which we walk all the time. Several dimensions. We have this body of flesh, of course, everybody knows. But beyond this body of flesh, we have invisible bodies, like an etheric body, which is a body of energy that keeps our health running. We have an emotional body where we express our thoughts, our feelings and emotions and sensations. And then we have a mental body where we express our thoughts. And then we have more spiritual bodies above that, and they all congregate into this aura of ours. Now, every thought we have, every feeling we have, every habits we pursue, and every action we make affect these bodies and affects this aura of ours. And when we meet people, this aura talks to the other person's aura. There's an exchange of energy. This is why you meet people, some you feel very strongly attracted because your energy and theirs jive, but some don't. Some have conflict. They clash so that you don't want to deal with them. So eventually you want to work with your energy world here and turn it into a state where you can be friends with everybody. Okay, so we're going to start walking this path, and we're going to see the different stargates on the path, which are open gates to other dimensions. Let's go.
Beam me up, John. Beam me up, Scotty.
Yeah. You got to build your wings first. So if you look at your map, you will notice that the path that leads from the archway to the temple looks like a serpent. It's called serpentine path. And the concept of the serpent really, in esoteric parlance, represents the spine. In your spine, there are many things happening that you don't see, but that are going on. As you're walking this path, imagine for a moment that you're actually walking inside of yourself. You're climbing your path, your spine, with 33 steps, okay? The first step is represented by this pine tree here, this star pine, which is considered to be an evergreen. An evergreen is a pine that sheds its leaf but can stay green all year long. All right? It's evergreen, meaning it has everlasting life. These represent the reproductive glands, or the genitals if you want, and represent the symbol of the sun, the life-giving sun. Now, with each of these different steps, we also have a spiritual power attached to it, which was demonstrated by Christ and his disciple when he was around. And in the case of this particular landmark, the spiritual power connected to it is the power of raising the dead. If you understand what that means, I didn't understand what it means, but I learned. So basically, we're talking about the power of initiation. Remember Lazarus in the Bible? Lazarus died, and his family was completely mad at Christ for letting him die. But after 3.5 days, he brought him back from the dead, an initiate. Gave him a new name, which was a secret name, of course. And he was now an immortal being because he had died and resurrected. This particular landmark talks about this particular process of resurrecting the dead, which is contrary to what everybody thinks about. When you're dead, you don't come back, right? But if you go through a spiritual death, which was Lazarus was going through, you're going through an initiation and you're laying on your canvas or bed, whatever, and you go inside the earth all the way to the core, and you learn all of the things that needs to be done in 3.5 days, and come back again and are resurrected, a new being who is immortal. Okay, you're an adept. An adept is an initiate of high level. Let's move on. The second stargate. It's a founder's cross, this circle with a star in the middle and a cross in the center of it with a rose bush at its bottom, which is the symbol of the Rosicrucian order. So now this is the second stargate. On this stargate, we're dealing with the adrenal glands. Okay? The adrenal glands are under the influence of the moon. Okay, and then at the moon they rule nature. So the adrenal talk about the power that Christ represented as the power to control the elements. And when I talk about the elements, I'm talking about earth, fire, water, and air. The 4 elements of astrology, the 4 elements of psychology, the 4 elements of alchemy, and so forth and so on, and the 4 pillars of nature. If you relate to the Bible, Christ was in the boat in the lake of Tiberias and with his disciples, and suddenly a big storm comes along and threatens to throw them into the water. And the disciples are panicked. And they wake up the Lord, who was, sleeping or resting, and he just opened his eyes, raised his finger and said, "You people of little faith." And as he raised his fingers, the storm completely stopped. He was controlling the elements. Now, what do we really mean by this? He was controlling the elements. You can do this. Any one of us can do this. But we don't really know how to do it. This is where we don't do it. But the thing is, the 4 elements I'm talking about here, the earth, the fire, the water, and the air, are actually living forces in nature. Okay? And if you remember the old fairy tales, in the fairy tales they talk about the fairies and the gnomes and all the undines and the sylphs and the salamanders. All of these nature spirits, forces, are living forces. They are living into the elemental strata of the invisible world, and actually are the motors or the cultivators or the elements that keep nature what it is. Nature is not a mechanistic thing like scientists want us to believe. Nature is a living entity, And this living entity is made of many spirits. And these spirits, some of them, I talk the nature spirits, okay? So if you go back to your old fairy tales, you'll find them again, okay? People think, oh, that's for children. No, it's not. It's for all of us. It reminds us that there is a truth, a universal truth, that we have to recover so that we can expand our consciousness. In this lunar expression, the adrenals are also the element that help us control the elements. And basically, these entities that I call nature spirits are living entities. They talk to us, they live with us, they are actually inside of us as well, because we have the 4 elements inside of ourselves. In the physical world, we have the gnomes who cultivate the plants, okay? In our etheric body, we have the salamanders that give us the energy, the fire. In the water, in our emotional body, we have the undines who manifest the water and the oceans and the rains and the rivers. And in the air, we have the sylphs who are manipulating the airy environment. Now, this is where our thoughts come in. The thoughts affect the air. The emotion and feelings affect the water. Our habits affect the fire, and our action affects the earth. So everything we do, even though we don't see them because we're blind, we affect nature. And they say, what you think now affects the Chinese on the other side of the planet, because even though we don't see them, they are partaking to this collective energy that we all do. So we talk about climate change, right? Talk about climate change. Well, climate is the result of our 4 energies. If collectively we think positive, and if we have good feelings and we forgive people for their bad stuff, and we have good habits and we take good actions, we change the world. But if we give in to negative thoughts and give in to negative feelings and get hurt and not forgive, and if we have bad habits that we keep repeating every day, and conclusion, we do bad actions, this all destroys the planet. And that destroys the weather, because this aura of ours is similar to the Earth's atmosphere. It has its own climate, its own storm, its own sunny days, depending on our mood and on everything. So all of this we are responsible for, and we will have to answer for it at the end of life. So if you take control of this energy by changing your life, you can control the elements. We are here at the 3rd stargate. On the map you see the 3rd star, okay, the yellow star. Well, this stargate is connected to the gland called the spleen and the pancreas, which are working together. And basically, these particular organs have to do with casting out devils. So you remember when Christ was brought, a man who was possessed by an entity, he threw the entity to the pigs. He cast the devil out of him. All right? So what does that really mean? It means that the person who is involved with this possession has a weak will. He's not using his internal power. That requires redeveloping willpower, redeveloping control of oneself, redeveloping powers of Mars, the warrior. It's the warrior who's going to defend his own kingdom from within. Obsession and possessions are things that happen a lot. Specifically, if people take drugs, they all become victim of this process, because they open the gate for these entities to come in and try to control them and move them to do things that they don't really want to do. So the process here requires regaining control of oneself, using one's willpower to be in charge of one's life, using your own internal power to control your life. because anything external to yourself is not going to give you any strength. It's going to weaken you more and more. So the light of this particular star really symbolizes that willpower that we need to shine all the time so that these negative entities don't come around. The fourth stargate, which is represented symbolically by the chapel here, was built in 1912. This particular stargate has to do with the thymus. The thymus is on your chest. The thymus is supposed to be a reserve of blood corpuscles for children before they can create their own by age 7. Okay? Before age 7, they are impossible. Their bone marrow doesn't create blood cells yet. So the thymus holds blood nucleus in reserve for this period of 7 years. And then depending on how you love your children, if children are loved, they generate more corpuscle in the thymus. But if they are not loved and they are abandoned or whatever, suddenly they have less and their health goes down the tube. This particular place has to do with healing, spiritual healing. That's what the thymus stands for. It's created by the love principle that heals everything, because love is the greatest healer in the world. We're going to go into the chapel and we're going to explore this a little more. We are in the middle of the 7. We're making the balance between the lowest 3 and the highest 3 is going to be next. Now the interesting thing about this chapel, if you actually look at it, you will find that it has 7 openings. I mentioned that we have 4 bodies and an additional 3 spiritual bodies. Okay, so the physical body is the densest, is the one that we see and touch and hug and feed. Everybody's familiar with it. That's the back door that is opaque because you can't see through it. The matter is too dense. But then each of the other doors and windows are opened up. You can see through them. Meaning that the spiritual world connects through these invisible doorways. So we have the etheric body, where we cultivate repetition for habits every day. We have a desire body or emotional body that we express our feelings and emotions on that last window. And then we have the mind, which is a double door here, which opens the way between the lowest part of the body and the highest spiritual expressions of them, the human spirit, divine spirit, human spirit, life spirit, and divine spirit, symbolical of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit within us. Okay? So this chapel was built, and it is twice as long as this is wide. All right? Like the tabernacle in the wilderness of ancient time. All of these, of course, are mysteries that you can learn. We have books on this, and it's fascinating to discover all of this intricate construction here and what it means. So in this particular chapel, we come to do services. At 8:15 in the morning, we have a healing service. We have a morning service, and at 4:15 in the afternoon, we have another service, prayer service. Okay. And on Sunday, we have a Sunday service at 11. Everybody's welcome. And basically, this chapel is where we generate some healing force. Okay? All our prayers really are used for healing the sick. This thymus gland that I mentioned, which is in the middle of our chest, the thymus gland holds the blood corpuscles for our childhood. But once the childhood is gone, it is the recipient where we accumulate the love energy that we share with people. Okay? And the more we share love with other people, the more this thymus becomes powerful in maintaining our health. In this particular chapel, we operate energies that are invisible, but that are used for spiritual healing. Now, let me talk about spiritual healing. When Christ was here, he wasn't healing with drugs and surgery like our doctors do. What was he doing? He was using a spiritual method. And that spiritual method consisted in recognizing the fact that our thoughts, our feelings, our habits, and our actions have a direct control of our health. If we keep positive attitude, are forgiving and loving and and generating positive feelings, if we eliminate our bad habits, start building some good ones, and as a result we start doing right action. And right action is what creates the positive environment in which we all dream of. All right? But we can't help it. Sometimes we have to do some bad stuff. And when we do bad stuff, we are really killing ourselves or making ourselves sick. So the whole principle is when the blind man came to Jesus and said, Master, please give my sight again. It is said in the Bible that Christ spat on the ground, mixed it with dirt, put it over his eyes, and told him, go wash in the pool of Siloam and sin no more. What is he saying? He's saying, you have been looking at the wrong thing. You have been looking in the wrong way. You have been misusing your sight. Or go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself. Wash your bad look, your bad perspective. And because the pool of Siloam is actually the pool of wisdom. That's what it means. And in the pool of wisdom, you're being told the right way. You're being shown the right direction. You're being given the right information. Because wisdom starts connecting with you. You eliminate your wrong vision and replace it with something positive and constructive, which will make you whole. So no need for Tylenol, no need for, surgery, eye surgery or anything like this. All you need is change your ways and you can change yourself. Change your mind, change your heart, change your life. If you live right, which is right action, right feeling, right thinking, it's going to be right living. And right living will keep you healthy.
Next, we went into the healing department, which is a beautiful, smaller building on the property where prayers are received from around the world and then taken care of. We had to take our shoes off before further entering the building.
In this building, we do a healing service at 8:45 in the morning. And this building really is connected to the thyroid gland, which is on your neck. And the thyroid gland has to do with the spiritual power of speaking in tongues. Highly controversial because there's a lot of misinterpretation of what it means. Oftentimes you go to those charismatic churches and you hear people starting to speak in other gibberish. And then somebody stands up and tries to interpret what the gibberish means, which is not what speaking in tongues is about. When the disciples were together at Pentecost, where the tongues of flame descended upon their heads, they started to speak in tongues, meaning they started to speak things that made sense to people who didn't speak their languages. In other words, they would be in Greece or in Turkey or in Libya or in other places where they have different languages, and they would speak in tongue. And by speaking in tongues, the people of those languages would understand what they meant, even though that was not their language. Because speaking in tongues means expressing the truth that your spirit understands, and you're so convinced of it that when you say the word, it could be in Greek or another thing, doesn't matter. Your thoughts conveys to the people your ideas. That's what the speaking in tongues is about. It's not about saying something that makes no sense to anyone, even to the people who say them. It has to do with speaking the truth from your mind. Power of thought. But you have to be really convinced of what you're saying. The disciples were initiates. They've been initiated by Christ into the mysteries, or the deeper mysteries of Christianity. And these mysteries give you access to all these inner worlds that we've been talking about. Inner world that we walk through all the time, but we're blind to because we don't know. And the purpose of the Rosicrucian movement is to teach you how to recognize this invisible world and how to use them to help humanity, not to help yourself. Because the whole path of Rosicrucianism as a path of selflessness, a path of love, a path of service. Like Christ said, he who would be the greatest among you, let him be the servant of all. Every time you pray for others, you're doing that service. You're sending out feelings and thoughts and energies that are being used by the invisible helpers who are in the invisible plane around us, and go visit the sick during night and help them recover and heal their whatever sickness. So the way we work with healing here is people write to us. They write to Oceanside here, to the headquarters, to the healing department, and they say, oh, I have a kidney problem, and the doctors can't fix it. You know, they've been trying everything. They wanted to cut my kidneys, but I didn't want that. So is there anything you can do to help me? And they also say in their letter, I have problem with my family, and things don't work out very well. There's kind of conflict. We asked them to tell us, well, what's your circumstances? What's going on? What kind of life you live? What kind of diet you have? What kind of profession you have? What kind of thing you're involved with? And give us your date of birth, your time of birth and place of birth, so that we can see through the ethers what's going on, so that we can give you suggestions. So basically we use that information and build an astrology chart for that person, and we compare the chart with what they say the problem is. And through the mechanism of astrology or spiritual astrology, we look at the different processes like transit and progressions and stuff. So we make a suggestion. We send a letter. So the guy received the letter a couple of days later, and he read that and he said, these people don't understand anything. He throw it in the trash, okay? Doesn't want to deal with it. So then he goes to bed at night. And you know, when you go to bed, your bodies, your invisible bodies, lift off from your physical and you fall asleep. But your consciousness is up there with these bodies in the invisible plane. So then what happened is an invisible helper comes along and say, hey, Robert, how you doing? So Robert said, well, life is okay, but, I have a problem at home. And he said, well, this is funny. You wrote to the fellowship, and the fellowship sent you a letter the other day, and you threw it in the trash. Oh, yeah, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm perfect. I don't do those things. I'm doing the right thing. So the invisible helper says, you remember last Wednesday, your wife came home, and she had this big problem because her friend had been really mishandled by the boss. And she had a big emotional problem with it, and she wanted to share with you so that you could support her. And what did you do that day? And Robert says, I don't know. And the invisible helper says, you went to the bar. So is that the way you're supposed to deal with your relationships and your family feelings and all that stuff? You need to change your ways, because this affects your stomach in Cancer and affects your kidneys in Libra. So the more you do this kind of thing, the more you create distortion in the energy of your vital body and creates a disease. So you got to learn to be more sympathetic, to be more empathetic, and so forth and so on. And listen to people who are, stressed. So it takes weeks and months for Robert to pick up the message, because he come back in the morning, he forgot everything. But over time, as the invisible helper plant the seed in his soul up in the invisible world, here he goes. He start one day realizing when it happens that he's got to listen. And when he start listening, suddenly his kidney problem goes away. And his stomach problem goes away. All you need is to change your way. Change yourself, change your life, change your thoughts, and your disease go away.
We finally got to go inside the temple And before we did, Jean gave us some pretty cool history about the valley that surrounds the temple, and also broke down some of the occult symbolism that decorates the temple outside and inside.
Back over there you see the mission, Mission Saint Louis Rey, built in 1898. Across the valley here you hear the Benedictine Abbey, the Prince of Peace Abbey. And here you have the Fellowship, so you have three spiritual institutions that form a triangle, because in the middle of this valley there is a huge etheric vortex, a vortex of etheric energy, which when Junipero Serra, the Spanish monk, came here, he saw the vortex and he says, this is where we're going to build the mission. Okay? And all the way through Northern California, from here over there, every 70 miles he finds the vortex and build the mission. That's 21 missions. The mission is built by the Franciscans, who are an order of mystics. They are on the heart side. The Benedictines are theologians. They are in the head side. All right? And here we try to combine the head and the heart. All right? Get the point?
Oh, yeah.
We have a temple here, looks like has some Masonic principles in it. You have two pillars, Joachim and Boaz, which is the masculine and the feminine pillars, surrounded by the sun and the moon. There's a balls on top, and it has the triangle, which represents the Trinity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In the middle of it, you have the all-seeing eye of God, which has been hijacked by the Illuminatis. Okay, the Illuminatis are a branch of no good people.
Right.
You know, they are using the spiritual teaching in a negative way.
Dark side. Yeah.
They are the dark side. So we don't, but they use the same symbol because it's the same force,
Right.
which they can use either for good or for ill.
Right.
Your choice. But consequence, there's a law of cause and effect. So if you use for good, you reap some good. If you use from ill, you reap some ill. The reason we have Leo and Aquarius on the doors, Leo here and Aquarius there, is because the Fellowship is a herald of the Aquarian age. In other words, we prepare people for the philosophy and the lifestyle of the Aquarian age. All of the thing we teach people is how to change our life from the Piscean age, which is the age we're still in, to the Aquarian age, which is in another 500 years
As we entered the temple, Jean explained that only the masters are allowed regular access, and that these masters have to devote themselves to a life free of toxins. This means that they have to be vegetarian so that they can respect all life. They cannot smoke because smoking pollutes the blood, and they cannot drink any alcohol because drinking invites entities and spiritual beings into the body. Inside this serene, mystical, and beautiful temple, these masters pray and transmute energy with the help of the spiritual masters on the other side. There are also midnight services that these masters perform to help transmute negative energy into positive energy, in which they spread across the world. The Oceanside Rosicrucian Fellowship is an amazing place. I had a great time, and I invite everybody to go check it out and try your best to make it to that once a year event so you can get the tour and also check out the inside of the temple. We ended our time that day with an awesome sermon, prayer, and song in the chapel.
There is only one force in the universe, namely the power of the eternal spirit, God, which is sent forth through space in a form of the word known as the creative fire. God is the only source of power. His presence is closer to us than hand and foot. And in Him, we really, truly, and literally live, move, and have our being. The Creator lives within His creation, and no one but Him can separate them. If I ascend into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there.